Hi there, this is Jackie Sawicky with the National and the Texas Coalitions Against Crypto Mining, and I am here today talking to Peter Howson. He is a professor, researcher, documentarian, and he's also an author of a really great book called Let Them Eat Crypto. Thank you so much, Pete, for coming. You're our first guest, so that's going to always be like a very special thing for us. So thank you so much for coming and welcome, and we're really glad you're here.
Thanks for having me on, and it's a big honor to be the first.
Of course, I always wanted to start by asking folks, um, like, who are you? Where'd you come from? Why are you so, aggravated and advocating against crypto? What's your story? What happened there?
Yeah, well, I think most people fall into the crypto swamp through Bitcoin because they hear about it and their ears prick, and they've got all these dreams about more equitable financial systems and things like that, and they give it more attention than it deserves in the beginning. I came into crypto, fell in the swamp via an actual swamp. I was living in a swamp forest in Indonesia, peatland swamp forest in Kalimantan. And I was working with local communities, indigenous communities, who were trying to get involved in carbon trading. So this is the thing where you try and offset your flights by clicking the little box, and then it magically makes the carbon disappear with the power of finance. So I was working with these people, and I could see the downsides in carbon offsetting, but I could also see that there may be some potential benefits for these indigenous folks, so that they could make money out of their forests instead of having to cut them down for timber. They could just, plug into global finance or whatever. And next door to the project that I was looking at, they started trading carbon credits using cryptocurrencies. And I was like, at the time, thinking, what's a cryptocurrency? This is brand new to me. This is like 2015. Or even, maybe it was, no, it was about 2015. I had to get my head around it in order for me to sort of finish my research. I didn't want to. I had to finish my PhD, so I had to kind of figure out what the hell was going on. And I was a bit of a booster, I'll admit. At that point, I was actually thinking this actually fixes a lot of the problems that I'd seen with carbon markets, because instead of super rich intermediaries and carbon cowboys, we called them, and brokers, instead of them sucking up all the benefits of this carbon market, actually you could connect the buyer and the seller without having to go through these, intermediaries. And the money could go directly to these indigenous people. And then over time, I realized it's not money. It's make-believe money. It's not real. It's a fake economy. And the people that are getting hurt are the indigenous people that stake all of their hopes and dreams on these magic beans. Yeah. And actually it made things a lot worse. So it caused a lot of evictions from people that were losing their land for these forest carbon projects. People obviously losing money that they were investing in these projects. And from then on, I like crypto, Bitcoin, it's specifically crypto for good. These projects that ostensibly kind of frame themselves as sort of helping with international development and conservation and climate change issues. That became my research bread and butter, and I've been looking in this space ever since. I haven't found any happy endings yet, I'm afraid, but that's probably what we can go into more detail about that.
Yeah, and if you don't mind, really quick, let's go a little bit back. When you say you're doing research, who and what are you doing research for? Where is it published? Where you located?
Well, in my boostering years, I published in places like Nature and high level kind of sciencey journals. These days, because my perspective has matured somewhat, I'm publishing in more kind of critical outlets. I'm a geographer and an environmental scientist that's my background. So that's where I publish. And then obviously there's the book, which has a lot of my more accessible thoughts in there. Like I've tried not to write that book to an academic audience at all. It's to people hopefully who are listening to this. So people who would like to look at the edges of this space, not just the kind of hardcore criminality, but actually look at how these scumbags are proliferating these projects around the edges.
Yeah, I really do appreciate the way you wrote your book. I've read a lot of crypto books and Bitcoin books, and some are quite dry and chewy, is how I describe it. And yours is very accessible. And I appreciate so much that you actually go to those places where they're making these incredible claims, and you ask the question that I wish most journalists would ask is this true? And your insightful, incisive, observations of what's actually happening on the ground is invaluable because we need more of that. We I say that we're fighting like asymmetrical warfare. They have slick lobbyists, they have whole newspapers, Cointelegraph and Coindesk and all of these things. They have entire media sphere, and there's this ragtag group of just critical thinkers, truth tellers, people who can't stand this pathological dishonesty inherent in the industry. And so, like, I am so grateful for your work and you going to those places and asking the question, is this true? What really happened here? So thank you very much for that.
The thing is, on that point though, like the reason that I was interested in crypto and blockchain projects was because I didn't think there was enough attention being put on the actual materiality of these projects. So there's a lot of hype and just vacuous chatter that you read in these Bitcoin, in these white papers that these blockchain projects put together, that gets picked up by the media, and they say, oh, this project is doing X, Y, Z, or whatever. The issue is that when you come to places, I'm currently in Peru, so I'm in a place called Cusco, just outside Cusco in the Andes. I came here because I wanted to speak with indigenous Quechuan people who supposedly had been participating in these what they call circular economies that are powered by cryptocurrencies, including Bitcoin. They're not here. No one. I've not seen a single one of these. So they come these Bitcoin proponents. They put these like slick videos together about how they're helping these Quechuan agricultural workers put together this sort of fairer economy, which but it's all rubbish. Like they put these videos together to make it appear as if Bitcoin cryptocurrencies have a use case, and they don't. So yeah, I mean it's tricky, and it takes a lot of effort to actually find places where there is something going on at all. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it is really interesting that I think after a decade or more of the carbon credit scheme, we can all agree that it's pretty much a scam. So I think it's interesting and appropriate that those two industries would, collide and you would find commonalities in both. So how did you go from carbon credits where these Bitcoin mining to proof of what I call proof of waste? How did you make that transfer, that jump?
Yeah, I think it started with I was asked to write an article that basically explained the environmental impacts of Bitcoin mining specifically. And this was like in 2019, I think.
Yeah.
So now it has the energy use of a medium-sized country like Poland. Back when I was looking at it, it was about the same as Switzerland or something. Um, and I wanted to look at the myths around how people were saying that Bitcoin was beneficial for environment and environmental problems and international development issues. So that was a short article that I wrote for the conversation, and I got such a massive attack from the crypto Bitcoin people, and that's when I knew that actually I had made a point. Like it was what I was saying was correct
Yeah.
and I piss people off. Yeah, I mean, it was like hundreds of hateful emails where they sort of doctored pictures of me and my family and sent it to me. Like I know you've had this as well, Jackie,
It
where it's
is
just
one of, I've been online for my entire adult life, and I have never met such a vitriolic, toxic, awful, awful, awful group of men. And they're like predominantly online, like they would never say something, the things that they say to a woman online, that they would never say that kind of stuff. It's just, it really, I mean, this being immersed in the cryptosphere, like kind of knocked down my hope for humanity a couple notches. It's just that gross. And David Columbia wrote a book, The Politics of Bitcoin, right wing extremism as a software. And I think it's really funny. Election time is here, and the masks are fully coming off because the SEC is finally showing some teeth in this to this industry, and they are just like, we have to elect Trump, and we're nonpartisan, but um, someone who incited an attempted coup on the United States government is extreme. That's an extremist. When they took that American flag down and put the Trump flag up on the Capitol, that to me was that is a moment I will never forget, and it's historical. I don't think most Americans will forget it. So they are going full mask off. They are the horrible, horrible human beings that we've always known them to be. And I'm sick of people walking on eggshells and not saying the truth. And this has a lot to I'm really disappointed in journalists because they both sides this industry as if any of the claims that they've ever made are true. Right now they're putting out this um, propaganda about it being good for the environment and the grid, diametrically opposed to what is reality. Bitcoin mining is the exact opposite of what we should be doing in the era of climate collapse, which is real. And I am so frustrated and disheartened by a lack of critical thinking in the media to go, wait a minute, should we be using a mid-sized country's worth of energy and water, everyone, to guess and throw away numbers 24/7? Oh, and by the way, it's also like torturing people with the noise pollution, driving up bills, drying up lakes. Is this really what we should be doing? And they'll say it's our private property. We can do what we want. And worse, they'll say much worse. But to your point, it's really frustrating that there's this disconnect between, again, what's happening on the ground, who these people really are, and how the mainstream media just coasts on whatever they say to get that equal both sides thing. That's not journalism. Journalism is actually getting to the truth.
mm. I
Yeah.
think as well though there's this sort of what and Antonio Guterres, who's the chief of the United Nations at the minute, who is also well in favor of blockchain and crypto solutions, and I talk about this in the book. I'm sure he's a nice guy, other than that, but like he makes the point that currently we're in this moment politically in a lot of countries, in the UK and the US specifically, what he calls the trust deficit disorder. That Trump is obviously preying on the fact that people don't trust governments and institutions like they used to. And so the perfect solution to that is to automate our financial system, go back to this sort of like digital kind of gold kind of standard idea where you can kind of eliminate the Fed from monetary policy, and the same the Bank of England in the UK. And they're preying on this moment rather than fixing these political problems that we're currently facing. Having a riot on Capitol Hill and social breakdown, political upheaval in the UK is a wonderful thing for these people. They need ashes to fly from as a sort of phoenix from the flames. That's how they see it. And that's why kind of this right-wing, hardcore cyber libertarian like philosophy is so enshrined within Bitcoin. So when people kind of say that Bitcoin is just apolitical,
Right.
that's nonsense. Like
Right.
it is like David Columbier was way ahead of everyone when he was actually making the point that, hang on a minute, no, Bitcoin and blockchain, crypto, integral to all of this is a hardcore right-wing politics. But yeah, I mean, just you were mentioning just the situation with the noise and all the other kind of environmental externalities that come from this industry. I've just come back from Texas, where there's lots of communities that are really suffering. Like it was heartbreaking going into someone's house and seeing that they've had to put mattresses up against the walls and sort of hook up this sort of small cocoon around their sort of newborn baby so that the baby can sleep and doesn't have to suffer from the 80 decibels of noise that's coming from this Bitcoin mining facility, which is sort of a couple of acres away, and this is sort of spreading out like in all directions. It's and the housing blight that it causes, these people can't move.
Yep.
No one wants to buy that property.
Yes.
There's just, all you can see is these for sale signs everywhere, because it's like these people are the worst neighbors. I mean, at least if it was this cyanide factory or something like that, you could use that for pesticides or something. But as you say, they're making numbers that are thrown away afterwards to facilitate nefarious activities.
Yeah, I always make a point to point that out, is without the Bitcoin processors, which are the miners, they are not miners, they're not mining anything. Without the Bitcoin transaction processors, the Bitcoin miners, we wouldn't be having these ransomware payments. 90+% of ransomware is paid in Bitcoin. So they're using the proof of waste mechanism, which they're routing those transactions through Riot platforms and Marathon Digital and TerraWolf. We wouldn't have the proliferation of, human trafficking like in Southeast Asia, from like Zeke Fox's book about Number Go Up. There's the child sexual assault material transactions being facilitated. All of the worst people, all of the worst crimes are being transacted on the blockchain, routed through, Hood County, Texas, Navarro County, Texas. Those local officials put their stamp of approval on one of the most heinous criminal cartels in the history of humanity. And it just boggles my mind that they either didn't know or they don't care.
Yeah, I mean, lots of people that I speak to on this issue, they make the point that this criminality pre-existed Bitcoin, and that you could carry out child sex slavery rings or whatever using dollars or something, or you can do ransomware attacks. Like we've had ransomware and malware for as long as we've had the internet. We haven't had it to this scale. Like Bitcoin cryptocurrency allows for the scaling up without any regulatory oversight of these big criminal activities. So I think that, the statistics show that nearly all, like we're talking 99.2% of all ransomware payments are now paid in cryptocurrency, mostly privacy preserving cryptocurrencies. But it all comes through the same crypto intermediary platforms like Coinbase and Binance, and it's those same shells enabling all of this. And yeah, I mean, the other thing that I mentioned in the book, like it used to be the average ransom that you'd pay for a kidnapping victim in, for example, from Sudan into Eritrea or something like that, was around about $900 or something. It was sort of an amount which meant that it wouldn't prick the ears of Western Union or any of these other intermediaries whose job it is to regulate these international transfers. With crypto, there's no limit.
Right.
And it means that actually now that you've got these human trafficking ransom payments and things that are now, like, the average is about 30,000 or something, just because you can. So I mean, it perpetuates all these crimes and it scales them up in a way that dollars could never do.
Yeah, and every single year is a new record year of criminals using crypto to crime. So 2023 was a record year. 2022 was a record year. It just keeps growing and growing. Like you said, it's scaling. And without regulations and oversight, I believe Professor Hillary Allen said the base foundation of crypto is regulatory arbitrage. I mean, the whole point of it being created was to circumvent taxes, sanctions. Like, I also commonly note that behind Texas, the second largest Bitcoin mining area in the world is Russia because they're evading sanctions put on them because of their attack on Ukraine. So this is a tool for despots, criminals, cartels, rogue nations, and most Americans, most UK citizens, they're not using this stuff. I often say, like, my 72-year-old mom is using Apple Pay on her, iPhone for everything. She's not using crypto, and it's been 15 years. Apple Pay is only 7 years old. So that goes back to this myth telling and the inherent dishonesty about exactly what this is in the first place. It's not a tool for, banking the unbanked and helping people flee from, awful things. It's helping those people who are making those folks flee.
This is the thing. I think I originally was in that camp where I thought it's probably best that we don't throw away the bathwater, but look for possible use cases within this technology, and maybe Bitcoin could be useful in the future. We just don't know in the current context of things that it could be. I was invited it was just before the pandemic, so 2019. There was a meeting in Washington that was being hosted by the UNDP, the United Nations Development Programme, and they'd asked me to come in and talk about the potential uses for cryptocurrencies and blockchain for forest restoration and forest protection. But there were lots of other people, experts, academic and practitioners, who had come, and they were invited there to talk about potential use cases for development and environment. And I was the most boosterish person. Like, all the other actual people who build blockchains and code these crypto software platforms, I was saying, oh yeah, it'd be brilliant. We could do all these sort of automated ecosystem service platforms and things. And they were like, you're on another planet. Like, you're obviously, you don't understand the limitations of this, like what it can do and what it can't do. And by the end of this workshop, it was unanimous that, blockchain does make everything worse. Like, everything, like every use case that was being pitched or, had been discussed, we'd all come to the same conclusion that it would work better without blockchain and without a cryptocurrency. And yet the UNDP from that workshop wrote this big report gushing about the potential use cases. And even 5 years later, from that, they brought out a report called Web3 by 2030, where they still talked about projects where the actual people who put those projects together were in prison, and they were still saying that like these projects are wonderful and would serve humanity in all these ways. So I mean, it's such an uphill slog, as you
Yeah.
probably know,
Yeah.
in trying to get people to see that they're like, if there is some use case that we really haven't thought of, there is so much crap. There's so much bad stuff
For sure.
that is overwhelmingly, it just shows that this technology does far more bad than good.
Yeah, I say the tiny little edge cases where maybe you had a positive experience does not outweigh the overwhelming vast majority of the past 15 years being nothing but fraud, scams, all the terrible crimes, the torturing local communities and, degrading the grids where these places congregate. Yeah, there's no justification for it. And I have a question about, was there a moment, was there like a light bulb moment? Because you said you were you were a little bit of a booster. Was there a light bulb moment, or was a slow progression of going, hey, wait a minute, maybe there's no there?
Yeah, so I mean, I think it was gradual. It was sort of lots of sort of incremental things that happened, that kind of opened my eyes to the huge downsides of this industry. But I mean, this UNEP conference was one of the big ones, because I actually thought I was going to go there and meet lots of people who were enthusiastic about these potential use cases, and I met none. And these were people who were in the industry, so I
Right,
was a
they were
bit
building.
like, yeah. So I and there's also this problem. Like, so we've got this paper that's in review at the minute, with political geography. Hopefully it'll be out by the time this goes to air, called Scam Space. And the the reviewers have looked at this, and they always come back with this: you have to be nuanced. You can't just say this, all you're doing here is showing bad things, because it's like, I haven't seen any good ones.
Right.
Like, I can't show you something that doesn't exist.
Nuance is
And
one of those words that sea lions love to use.
right, right,
Yeah.
right.
But
And
you but it can't all be that bad. No, it really is. Yeah.
right. Um, I mean, you could say some individuals get rich, and sometimes those individuals are, come from poor black neighborhoods or something. But that doesn't mean that, like, the vast majority of other people who want nothing to do with Bitcoin and crypto obviously lose out in this Ponzi-nomic nightmare. So I mean, that was always a frustration for me. But it also, when I was in my sort of the final twilight part of my boosterish years, that I was constantly looking for good things in order to provide that nuance that the reviewers wanted or whatever. And yeah, I've run out of that now. Um, I've run out of energy to try and look really for the good things. I'm just saying it how it is.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, I mean, there was there were some hard times as well. I've lost friends,
Me
like,
too. Yeah.
I'm a nice person, and you wouldn't believe that I, lose friends over this. But very good friends,
Yeah.
that just see me as being this kind of like contrarian, bitter person, and they've got their life savings wrapped up in this thing. How dare I, show everyone that it's actually a fraudulent scam? And that's my fault. Nothing to do with them
Right.
being, trying to convince I mean, you may have this, but if you have a kind of large pool of friends in a WhatsApp group, people who are just sort of peripheral friends, they're not like you don't see them all the time, whatever. So you just communicate via a WhatsApp group. There's always one or two that have invested in some token or something and who are trying to, enroll you into this, harebrained crypto scheme or something. And those
It's
people
very
are,
much like an MLM,
yeah, exactly. It's
very
very similar.
much. Yeah.
And it preys on the same people. It preys
Vulnerable,
on
lonely.
vulnerable, yeah, often young mums and people who are trying to, they're saying, oh, you can be a business leader or something and have your own business selling financial assets and stuff. And it's just a Ponzi-nomic fraud. So yeah, there's been lots of things. So losing friends, yeah, just being exposed to more and more experts. I think I set out to make a short film in which I will make when I have the time. But this was in like 2020, and I was talking to people like David Gerard um, and Alex DeVries and people like that, and I was trying to pose tricky questions to them about these use cases, and they were just like, no, you're not a right thinking person. But
Yeah, I've noticed, I mean, and I started bookmarking. So even today there was this big announcement announcement in the propaganda circles about Visa and MasterCard starting a token system or something like that. And I bookmark it, and you come back a year later and that thing either never happened, it was like a tiny little test and it failed, or they end up pretending to keep the blockchain stuff, but it ends up being, just a regular database, and they just try to keep it quiet. But every single use case with like traditional finance, blah blah blah, uh, commerce, it's failed. It is a antiquated, obsolete, glorified spreadsheet. So I think that is another really important thing to note is every time y'all hear this a claim that so and so business is picking up Bitcoin or starting to use blockchain for their stuff, they're not. And if they do, it's going to fail. There is no real world blockchain. A really famous example was Australia or New Zealand stock exchange tried to convert to blockchain, and it was a total disaster, and it's become like a national scandal. So there is no there. And they use this. I want to talk now about predatory language because you said single mothers. And when Chad Harris, the previous CCO of Riot Platforms, who's building a Bitcoin mine here, when they made the announcement here in Corsicana during the Q&A section, he said something about hiring, oh, you know what? It was during a different meeting, but hiring single moms because single moms will get the job done. They'll do what they need to do for their family. And I felt that was such predatory language because every single mom in the county is now going to be paying higher electricity bills because of this place. And only like 0.0001% of people would actually work there if they actually create the 150 jobs. They're not going to. We know that they're not going to. So can you talk about this predatory language, predatory inclusion, the way that they prey on vulnerable populations?
yeah, so I mean, it's similar to the sort of MLM structures that we see that specifically prey on women in vulnerable, not vulnerable situations, but they're just parts of they're in a time in their life where they find themselves lonely at home with a child or something, and obviously the pressures of having to make ends meet. They just think, oh well, I'll try these working from home schemes that involve crypto or something. So Jared Ball, in his brilliant book, The Myth of Black Capitalism, he refers to this as cryptoganda. Like, so he makes the point that that there's a reason why poor Black communities are struggling, and it has nothing to do with the fact that they're not engaging with cryptocurrencies. like white people are. So when we think of your prototypical crypto bro, you're thinking of someone with a college degree, generally white, with a bit of spare cash that they invest into cryptocurrencies. So all of those people, they all cashed out a long time ago. Those investors, because it's a Ponzi scheme and it's a scam. Like there are still a few naive ones that are still got stuff, got money in Dogecoin or something. But what a lot of these crypto exchanges has done, so Paxful was notorious with this, is that they would put this plan in place, which they called hyper Bitcoinization. So the idea is that they would try and build this illusion that this technology has use cases for poor communities. And they would use these communities as an experiment to show that actually you can have equitable financial systems. But they would go to the poorest parts of the world because they are the people who have less internet access. They're kind of less au fait with the sort of downsides to these technologies. They're in places where regulators and governments aren't overseeing the actions of these corporations. So they would go to places like Peru or to Uganda, and they would also go to poor black neighborhoods in the US. And this is the point that Jared Ball makes in The Myth of Black Capitalism, that actually, even if you as a black community pooled all your resources and invested it in a cryptocurrency project or something like that, you still aren't changing anything structurally. You're enriching a certain type of people. So we wrote a paper, Alex DeVries and I, a few years ago, Preying on the Poor, and we specifically in that focused on proof of work cryptocurrencies. I talk about it in the book. I use this analogy of these plaque disclosing tablets. I don't know if you had these in the US, but when we were kids in the UK, the dentist would give you these like inky tablets that are probably full of toxic things that make you very ill. But you swish it around your mouth and they would stick in dark clumps to the dirty bits in your teeth, and that's where you have to concentrate your brushing. That's what proof of work does. It's plugged into global energy networks and it sticks in dark clumps to war zones, corrupt governments, places where there's lots of social deprivation, and they're the places that proof of work cryptocurrencies love, because they can get cheap energy, they can take advantage of corrupt politicians, pay them off. This is why you see it in Texas.
I was just about to say that. Yeah, I heard you say that on another podcast, and it was like a lightning bolt hit me. Because again, Russia's an oligarchy. They're huge in Russia right now. And they go to places where there is little to no regulation, no oversight. Texas has been deregulated to the point where, every water source that's tested is polluted. It just feels like there's no protections here. And they are deeply corrupt. They absolutely go to places where they know they can get away with it.
Like in 2019, 2020, people who know lots about Bitcoin will know this already, but China essentially fully declared Bitcoin proof of work mining illegal. They did this for predominantly environmental reasons because they knew that they couldn't meet these high environmental targets that they'd set themselves, that they couldn't meet their international obligations in terms of climate change if they had the huge amount of Bitcoin mining that was going on in the country at that time. And this caused what we've referred to in the book as a butterfly effect. Like this seemingly sensible idea of getting rid of something which is an environmental disaster actually increased the carbon footprint of this network and the environmental problems that come with it. So, as you say, water use, ASIC mining, e-waste, which are all covered in these PFASs, these forever chemicals that give you thyroid cancer. Like all of these problems increased because China, who was at that time hosting, some people believe, up to 70% of the global network of Bitcoin mining machines. A lot of them went to Texas at that point from China because Texas doesn't have those same high targets for environmental performance that they had in China. And a lot of them went to Eastern European countries like Abkhazia, which is a breakaway region of from Georgia. They and obviously these are ex-Soviet war zones, you know, places like Moldova and Transnistrian Republic. Anywhere where there was sort of like a government on its knees, that's where Bitcoiners went because they can corrupt local officials and get the cheap energy that they need. And as soon as that government gets on its feet, they can bugger off. They can unplug and move somewhere else.
Right.
So they went to places like Kazakhstan, which is like a fossil fuel oligarchy, where there's governments that have you know, big business interests involving energy generation. So they would, all of these Bitcoin miners went to Kazakhstan. Kazakhstan had about 18% of the global network at the time. And it was only, what I argue in the book, not everyone agrees with me, but I think that was the straw that broke the camel's back when they had this big uprising about the price of electricity and other fuels. Sorry, the electricity and gas and oil and liquid natural gas that a lot of cars are powered on in Kazakhstan. So there was this big uprising, big riots. Russia came in, quashed this rebellion, arrested loads of people that had been protesting, killed lots of them. And then everyone moved from Kazakhstan and went to Texas and other places. And this will keep continuing. This butterfly effect will continue. And if Texas does the right thing eventually, and they will, it's like whack-a-mole, you know,
Right.
Texas will realize that these people are causing there'll be possibly another polar vortex event which will kill lots of people again, and Bitcoiners will make that even worse, and they'll move somewhere else.
I constantly say that these guys are putting 30 million Texas lives at risk, and this is not hyperbole. We are already seeing record demand earlier and earlier every year. They made Riot Platforms alone made $125 million when Uri happened, when 250 to 700 plus people died from exposure. They made out like bandits. I mean, when Riot announced on Twitter that they had broken ground here in Navarro County, the first thing I did was call the TCEQ, the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality, and I asked, did they get this one single permit that they had to get? Stormwater runoff. No, they didn't. I mean, they will cut every corner. They will tell every lie to get away with it. And when they can't get away with it anymore, they just pick up and I mean, a lot of folks don't realize also that a lot of these systems will be illegally set up in pastures and then people will find out and then they'll be gone. So there are so many, of course, they sued the government to keep it a secret, but there's 3.5 gigawatts of Bitcoin miners on the Texas grid that right now that we know of. There could be so much more. And I am telling you, there is so much more. And that's why the Riot Platforms and the Texas Blockchain Council sued the government to keep that information secret. Because the second that Texans find out exactly how much of a burden they're putting on the grid and smart people reverse engineer that and figure out how much that is costing each and every Texan, there will be upheaval. Not in a violent way, but we are trying to educate Texans and tell folks this is already affecting you, whether you live near a mine or not. It is costing you money. You are paying their bills. You are paying their taxes. And you're paying their property taxes. And property taxes are a huge issue in Texas right now. We are paying a lot for these guys to get off scot-free on hundreds of millions of dollars worth of property. And it's also like they just clear cut it's so ugly on top of everything. Texas is such a beautiful state. What do you think about driving through, by the way? I'm sorry we
Yeah,
missed you.
I was looking at the riot and marathon bits mostly. So I did see the war zone that they leave behind. It was weird, like actually we went down to the proposed site where Riot are building the second super huge Bitcoin mining hub, and I was with a photographer, very talented photographer, Paul Dolan, who was using an infrared camera to take these amazing images. And when I looked at those images, I was like, that looks like Gaza. Like it looked like all of these sort of like the caterpillar diggers and things that you see these bulldozers everywhere, and just this like looking at what would have been this beautiful landscape
Yeah.
that just had this huge, like you can't get your head around the
It is
scale of this
massive.
thing.
I tell folks you got to go visit it. It's so big you can't imagine how massive it feels. You have to
No.
stand next to it. Yeah.
And it's got this sort of iron framework, concrete wall that goes along it. And you're driving and driving, and the wall's still there,
Yeah.
and the iron's still going. And you're just like, how is this just playing guess a number?
Yeah.
It is insane. And like, you think that that must be like a theme park in there or something. It's only when you look through and you see the sort of war zone inside that you realize it's something far more nefarious. Yeah.
Very much so. We had to ask for months and months and months, how much water are y'all going to be using? And they told a bunch of different, half truths and lies. Chad Harris, who's been he just disappeared. He just got fired and never heard from again. So I'm still curious what happened there. But he said, "Oh, we're going to take one big pool and then we'll just top off every once in a while." And we're like, "What are you talking about?" I mean, it was just they lie to your face. They just lie and lie and lie. So after several months of records requests, we found out they actually want 1.5 million gallons of water a day. And I say that we know of. This industry, you give them an inch, you let them in the door, and they are just going to blow it wide open. They are going to go that full mile and they're just going to take and take and take. There is no such thing as enough in this industry. It's really important for folks to understand that there is no other technology created to purposely consume as much energy as possible. There is no such thing as enough. The more numbers they can guess, the more times they can hit that Bitcoin lottery, the better for them. And it doesn't matter who they're harming. It doesn't matter that the animals are no longer anywhere in Hood County. It doesn't matter that chickens are just keeling over for no apparent reason and children are going deaf. What matters is number go up and hitting that number. And it is so sociopathic to me. There is no conscience in that industry. Again, they will, like in Hood County right now, they're saying Marathon Digital is saying, we had no idea that there was a noise problem. Excuse me, there's been a noise problem for 2 years. The people they bought it from put up a very terrible, pathetic little noise mitigating wall that cost a couple of $1 million. Did Marathon Digital do zero due diligence and they had no idea there's noise going on? Or are they absolutely lying to your face, to the journalist's face, to the entire community, knowing full well that they're lying and that they knew there was a noise problem?
Mhm.
Judging by the history of my interactions with the industry, I'm going to say they were totally bald-faced lying.
Mm. I mean, this is what we saw even as the prices of these tokens were booming. The articles were coming out was saying the price of Bitcoin is going through the roof, but unfortunately no one's using it because the price of these the value is purely speculative. It isn't based on how many people is using this technology, and unfortunately the environmental footprints is also has nothing to do with the use. But I could see if people in the UK, if the government said we're going to build an enormous new freeway network, um, I would say, oh, that's probably not a good idea, but lots of people are going to be using it, so maybe it's okay. But with this, it's like we're going to use all of these resources, and hopefully, when it gets to each Bitcoin is worth £1 million each or whatever, it will have a carbon footprint 3 times the size of Germany's or something. But it's okay. But still, it wouldn't be. No one would be using it. This is the thing. No one uses Bitcoin for anything other than speculation, fraud, and the sanctions evasion, and all these other things that we've been talking about.
Yeah, when I go into town, I ask folks, number one, have you heard about the Bitcoin mine? The world's largest Bitcoin mine is being built in my county outside of Corsicana, Texas. Half the people still don't even know it's happening because the media, the local media, the Corsicana Daily Sun and the Navco Chronicle aren't allowed to talk about it. They're not allowed to write about it. They're not allowed to critically examine. If anything, it'll be like bullet points or just a copy and paste of their press release. But so it's not, people aren't informed on the local level. And then I ask folks, do you use crypto? Do you know anybody who uses crypto? I have talked to thousands of people. I can count on like less than 10 people that I've interacted with in real life have ever actually used crypto. So again, everybody's paying for it, but just an incredibly tiny amount. I call it like a serially niche, online group of people are just like destroying the planet in a hopes of getting rich quick. And it is just so perverse.
I mean, I think we're seeing with Bitcoin the exact same pattern as we saw with the tobacco industry, with the fossil fuel lobby, people who were advocating for fire retardants in mattresses and things like that. It's the merchant of doubt playbook that we're seeing, which is propping up the whole Bitcoin economy, I think, right now. Like, we try our best, Jackie, you and I, and there's not lots, but there's a handful of other people who are trying to blow the whistle on this. But they've got so much, their resources that they have are obscene.
Yeah.
And it does seem like the press are just so keen to have any positive story when it comes to crypto. I mean, we saw recently this organization called the Satoshi Action Fund. He's this guy who's got sort of put together all these T-shirts saying "Save the planet, mine Bitcoin" sort of thing. But this is the Merchants of Doubt playbook.
Yeah.
You take all the evidence and you don't necessarily have to put any energy into refuting the huge amount of evidence. All you have to do is create this illusion that there is this debate which is yet to be had or something. Right. Like you just create this sort of atmosphere of uncertainty around the facts. And this is what they do. They're really good at this.
AKA misinformation.
Right. But I mean, they're connected with academia as well. Like, there's lots of...
Texas A&M is killing me. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, there was a massive push from Satoshi Action Fund recently where they were sort of saying how good Bitcoin mining was for sustainability and energy grid security and things like this. And they said that we offset, 700,000 cars worth of methane, even though cars don't really emit methane, but it's like all of this sort of scammy stuff. But then you look at the people who've written the research, which they're basing it all on, and it's just, I've got it here in front of me, the paper that they're citing, and it's written by someone who works for the Satoshi Action Fund.
Right.
And it's like, how is a journal, in this case MDPI, which is, it's a predatory journal, but at least they're paying money for junk science and their crappy journal. And it doesn't, people are, you and I would probably take the effort of clicking through to the source of where they're getting this information and
Right.
go, oh, yeah, I know Satoshi Action Fund. I know that they're a big player in the lobbying industry for Bitcoin. But most people wouldn't bother. They would just accept it.
Right.
And this is what we're playing
Well,
against.
most people in the cryptoverse, because they have shown themselves to be easily fooled. I mean, that's a big part of the predatory thing is getting people who are easily manipulated and suckered. So I thought I've seen a lot of stuff on crypto and fraud, and like they will, like these, Nigerian prince emails and stuff like that. They prey on people that are not critical thinkers. So yeah, they can say it's good for the grid. And I mean, I've been doing this Texas coalition for 2 years now, and I've had to become, knowledgeable about the Texas energy system, which is just, it's like a free for all. It's like Wall Street, but for energy, you know, uh, environmental stuff. Like there is so much to know. There's so much in this. And again, that's why we're doing these longer form podcasts so that we can talk about, get into the minutia and get into the weeds because they don't want us to know. They don't want us to look. They don't want us to critically examine when they say, "Oh, it's actually good for the grid." And that Dennis Porter is the guy who is he's literally flying all over the country shopping out this incredibly anti-democratic bill called the right to mine. And what it does is it forces local municipalities to host Bitcoin mines whether they want it or not. It completely takes away the sovereignty of these local municipalities, which is so ironic because these are libertarians and they don't want the government telling them what to do. But in this case, he is shopping out a law that says you cannot make regulations preventing a Bitcoin mine from coming. You can't be discriminatory against Bitcoin mining. Just the language that they use, again, like nobody's discriminating against you. They're trying to prevent ecological devastation. They're trying to prohibit noise pollution and their property values being destroyed. You're not being discriminated against. Like they're trying to prevent harm. And so Dennis Porter and that swag, that save the planet, mine Bitcoin, I say that anger is a renewable resource, and that swag itself will keep me fueled for the rest of my life. It is so infuriating, the double speak, the greenwashing, the just overt lies. Because at one point I did want to be a journalist, and I do think it's important, especially now more than ever, that we're honest and that there is some regulations. Like AI is terrifying because we're just being inundated with terrible, bad information. And crypto miners, they are so much part of that monster machine of just spewing out bad information that it's hard to find good information from the bad. So that Dennis Porter guy, Satoshi Action Fund, I don't like using the word enemy, but enemy number one right now of the National Coalition Against Crypto Mining. He is making headways. You will notice that he's going to red states with little regulations. He's not going to California and Oregon and Massachusetts to shop this thing out. He's going to Texas, Kentucky, Ohio, Missouri. He's going to these places where, and again, they also come in and they kind of steamroll folks. Local governments don't want to look like they're dumb. They want to be hip and in on the innovation thing. And that goes back to that whole manipulation of language. They dress it up and make it seem like it's the future when it is, again, 15 years old. And these folks don't want to look dumb, but they actually are kind of getting just steamrolled. And then like Arkansas now is they passed that right to mine bill and they are trying to unring that bell now. They put changes on the bill and stuff to go, oh no, maybe local municipalities can. Dennis Porter bragged, he bragged about before Arkansas passed the right to mine bill, like dozens and dozens of counties preventatively passed noise ordinance laws to prevent Bitcoin mines from coming. And he's like, with this right to mine bill, all of those are going to be struck down. Yeah. And it was just like, Oh my God, he's literally bragging about subverting the will of the people. And it was just, it's crazy to me. And that save the planet, mine Bitcoin, it just makes my brain explode. It makes me so angry. So
But
he,
yeah, it does seem
yeah,
to be like the total opposite. So like
yes.
Alex Gladstein, for example, of the Human Rights Foundation. And again, it's just sort of like they use this language of human rights. It's your human rights to mine Bitcoin. It's like, no, it's not your human right to use a country's worth of electricity to enrich yourself with Bitcoin. Like, but it's that, why would you be against human rights? It's like, it's this sort of language play
Oh
type
yeah.
thing to win people over. I've got to go and pick my daughter up, but there's loads I just want to talk about, which is,
I know
um,
we're gonna do part two. So
okay,
can I'm gonna we'll do a lightning round. I want to end all things because it's so heavy. I know this podcast is going to be like a lot of doom and gloom. So I want to end in like a little hopeful thing I call three things, which we do here at home all the time. So would you mind naming something you're thankful for?
I need to give this some thought.
I know it's going to be a
Because
tough one.
it needs to be profound. I'm thankful that there's people like you and other activists who 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 realize the damage that this stuff is doing. And yeah, I mean, it's great. I'm thankful to not just be shouting
Yeah,
into nothing. You know, there are actually people that are share that perspective. Yeah,
for sure. Can you name a person you admire?
I admire my 4-year-old for just, being not taking things so seriously. I
Yes.
try and be more like him, but I'm failing right
I know I
now.
have zero chill. I'm right there with you. Okay, last one. Can you name an activity you'd like to try? Something that you're like, maybe one of these days.
I really wish I was good at skateboarding.
Skateboarding. Yeah, I'm too accident
Yeah,
prone for that.
yeah.
Yeah.
I bought a skateboard. It's still in its plastic wrap.
Oh, well, get
Um,
out there. Well, you start watching some
yeah,
videos first,
yeah. I'll
some
watch
YouTube.
YouTube and things. Yeah, there'll be a podcast about it or something.
Oh my gosh. Well, thank you so much, Peter Howson, for joining us on our inaugural Proof of Waste podcast, where we delve into the predatory, manipulative, dishonest industry of Bitcoin mining and crypto in general. Thank you so much. It is such a pleasure and honor to be here with you. And I really appreciate you being here.
Thanks for everything you're doing, Jackie. It's
Thank you.
making a difference.
Oh, man. I appreciate you
Yeah.
saying so. Talk next time.
If anything you saw today makes you want to act, we need your help. Join us. Fill out the form below, and we'll get you onboarded into the National Coalition Against Crypto Mining. Thank you so much for watching.